Did you know that over 300 million people worldwide struggle with depression every year? It's one of the leading causes of disability, yet many of the habits fueling it go completely unnoticed. Tiny things like chewing gum, snacking on sugar, or relying on caffeine might seem harmless. But habit number 11 quietly feeds depressive feelings. Stick around because this one hits close to home, and you'll see just how sneaky it really is. Habit number 1. Scrolling aimlessly for hours. You know that feeling when you grab your phone just for a second and suddenly half the day is gone? That kind of aimless scrolling feels harmless, but it drains you more than you realize. Research shows that heavy doom scrolling is linked to nearly a 30% increase in depressive symptoms, mostly because your brain keeps absorbing emotional chaos it never gets time to process. The worst part is how it slowly disconnects you from real life. You lose sleep, your focus drops, and your motivation crumbles. Not because you don't care, but because your brain is overstimulated and exhausted. That exhaustion ironically pushes you to scroll even more, trapping you in a feedback loop. Toward the end of the day, what really helps is creating small, scroll-free pockets. Nothing extreme, just minutes of breathing room that remind your brain how to be present again. Like Cal Newport says, clarity about what matters provides clarity about what does not. And honestly, once you protect your attention, the rest of your life starts lining up again. Habit number 2. Delaying basic hygiene. When you start pushing off showers, avoiding brushing your teeth, or letting tiny self-care tasks pile up, it's rarely laziness and it's mental heaviness. Depression makes even the smallest tasks feel like dragging your body through mud. Studies show that over 60% of people with depression struggle with basic hygiene, not because they don't want to, but because their executive functioning drops under emotional load. It spills into daily life fast. You begin feeling disconnected from yourself, guilt builds, and your self-esteem takes repeated hits. That guilt then fuels the depressive cycle, making the next tiny task feel even bigger. It becomes a loop of avoidance and self-blame. A gentle way out is shrinking the task until it's unintimidating. Washing your face, changing your shirt, brushing for 20 seconds. These low-pressure wins add up. As James Clear puts it, habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. And honestly, nothing breaks paralysis like giving yourself proof of progress, even in tiny doses. Habit number 3. Relying on background noise 24/7. If you can't sit in silence without instantly turning on YouTube, a podcast, or music, you're not just bored. For many people, constant noise becomes emotional armor, a way to avoid intrusive thoughts or feelings that hit harder in silence. Research links noise dependency with higher loneliness and emotional overstimulation. The issue is that nonstop audio keeps your brain at a constant low-level buzz. You never fully rest, never fully feel, and never fully reset. Worst case, you become scared of silence itself, because silence forces you to confront what you've been avoiding. Late in the day, it helps to practice micro moments of quiet, even 60 seconds. You're not detoxing, you're retraining your nervous system. As Thich Nhat Hanh said, silence is essential. We need silence just as much as we need air. And honestly, once you learn to sit with yourself, your thoughts stop feeling so loud. Habit number 4. Overplanning but never starting. You know that thing where you make the perfect plan? The list, the schedule, the color coding, and then never actually start? That's not a discipline issue. That's fear hiding inside the structure. Studies show that around 70% of chronic procrastinators experience depressive tendencies like fear of failure and low self-trust. Every plan you don't start becomes another hit to your confidence. It convinces you you're all talk, even though the real issue is the pressure you've built around the task. Over time, it keeps you stuck because planning feels productive enough to replace action. What helps is lowering the bar until action feels effortless. A 5-minute start, a rough version, anything imperfect. Like Mark Twain said, the secret of getting ahead is getting started. And honestly, once you take even one small step, your brain stops fearing the task and starts trusting you again. Habit number 5. Eating at random times or not eating at all. Depression often scrambles your appetite. Some days you forget to eat. Other days you eat one chaotic meal at midnight. Research shows that about 48% of people with depression experience appetite disruptions, which trigger energy crashes, irritability, brain fog, and unstable mood. When your eating rhythm is chaotic, your body can't properly regulate mood. You start relying on caffeine hits, sugar spikes, or long fasting gaps that make you feel worse. It becomes a physical loop, feeding an emotional loop. A helpful reset is adding consistency, not restrictions. Even one meal at the same time daily stabilizes your blood sugar enough to lift your mood. As Brené Brown says, we don't have to do all of it alone. We were never meant to. And honestly, your body has been trying to carry you, even through bad days. You just have to give it a little support back. Habit number 6, constantly rewatching the same shows. When you keep rewatching the same comfort show over and over, it's not just a preference, it's emotional self-protection. You already know what's going to happen, so there are no surprises, no emotional spikes, nothing unpredictable. Studies show that repetitive media watching is linked to higher emotional avoidance and a stronger tendency to use TV as a coping mechanism for stress or depressive feelings. The problem is that this loop keeps you from actually processing your emotions. It numbs instead of heals. Worst case? Your world shrinks. Your emotional range dulls. You stop trying new things because safe and known becomes the default. A gentle way forward is switching just one episode a day to something new, even something mildly different. It breaks the loop without ripping away your comfort. As C.S. Lewis said, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And honestly, even one small change can widen your world again. Before we jump into habit number 7, do me a quick favor, like the video and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. Because habit number 7 is a big one. Most people think it's just tiredness, but it's actually one of the clearest signals your mind is trying to tell you something deeper. Trust me, you'll want to hear this. Habit number 7, oversleeping or sleeping in odd chunks. When your sleep happens in random chunks or you keep sleeping 10 to 14 hours, it's usually not tiredness. It's your brain trying to shut off. Depression is strongly tied to hypersomnia, with about 40% of people experiencing excessive or irregular sleep patterns. This isn't restorative sleep, it's escape sleep. The cognitive impact hits fast. You feel foggy, slower, disconnected, forgetful, and emotionally flat. Over time, irregular sleep disrupts your circadian rhythm, which affects your hormones, hunger, energy, and even your capacity to feel pleasure. Worst case? Day and night start blending together, and your motivation disappears because your internal clock isn't giving you any structure. A reset that helps is going for regular wake-up times first, not bedtime. Waking up at the same hour anchors everything else. As Ariana Huffington puts it, sleep is a performance enhancer. And honestly, when you regain control over your mornings, your mind slowly follows. Habit number 8, ignoring messages, even from loved ones. When you start ignoring messages, even from people you love, it's not because you don't care, it's because your brain feels overloaded. Opening a message means you have to think, respond, maybe explain yourself, and when your energy is low, that feels like a chore. Studies show that social withdrawal is one of the strongest behavioral markers of depression, with communication avoidance increasing as mood drops. But ignoring messages comes with a price. People think you're drifting away, relationships quietly weaken, and you start feeling isolated, which ironically deepens depressive feelings. Inside, you tell yourself you'll respond later, but later becomes guilt, and guilt becomes avoidance. A tiny fix is replying with one short line. Even "I'll respond properly later" keeps connection alive. Like Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And honestly, even a 3-word reply can keep a whole relationship breathing. Habit number 9. Keeping your room dark all day. When you keep your room dark on purpose, it's usually because the light feels overwhelming, or your brain just doesn't have the energy for the day. But darkness has effects most people don't notice. Studies show that low light exposure is linked to higher rates of depression, partly because sunlight controls your serotonin, melatonin, and internal circadian rhythm. A dark room makes your brain think it's always nighttime, which tanks your mood, drains your energy, and kills your motivation to move. Worst case, your sleep cycle collapses and your mind becomes stuck in a fog where every day feels the same. The simplest fix is opening your curtains for 5 minutes a day. You don't have to flood the room. Just let natural light touch your brain. As Albert Camus wrote, "In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer." And sometimes that summer starts with a single ray of light. Habit number 10. Over-explaining or apologizing excessively. If you catch yourself saying sorry too often or explaining things way more than necessary, it's usually a sign of deeper insecurity. Depression and low self-esteem often make you believe you're inconveniencing people, so you overcorrect. Studies show that people with low self-worth are significantly more likely to over-apologize, and self-esteem issues overlap with depression in over 80% of cases. The emotional cost is real. You start doubting your value, your opinions, your presence. Relationships become unbalanced because you shrink yourself down, and people may unintentionally treat you accordingly. Worst case, you lose your voice without realizing it. A healthier shift is practicing neutral statements instead of apologies. "Thanks for waiting" instead of "I'm sorry I'm slow." Over time, it rewires your sense of worth. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." And honestly, reclaiming your voice is the first step to reclaiming your confidence. Habit number 11. Picking up small addictions. Gum, sugar, caffeine, etc. People don't jump straight to big addictions. They slip into micro addictions first. Things like constantly chewing gum, eating sugar hits, or relying on 3 to 5 cups of caffeine a day. These tiny habits form when your brain is looking for quick regulation, especially during stress or loneliness. Studies show that over 60% of coping addictions start as small, harmless habits before becoming emotional crutches. The problem? Each micro addiction teaches your mind to avoid real emotional discomfort. Over time, the cost isn't physical, it's emotional dependence. Worst case, these tiny habits escalate into stronger compulsions, and suddenly you're stuck in a cycle of, "I need something, anything, just to feel okay." One helpful reminder comes from psychiatrist Dr. Judson Brewer, who said, "Every habit is an attempt to solve a problem the mind hasn't named yet." And that quote hits hard, because naming the problem is where healing starts. A small way to break this? Swap the impulse, not the substance. Replace the "need something" moment with water, stretching, or 30 seconds of stillness. It's not dramatic, but it rewires the loop, slowly and surely. Habit number 12. Daydreaming too much or mentally escaping. Daydreaming isn't bad, but when it becomes a constant escape, it's usually because the real world feels too heavy or too loud. People slip into compulsive fantasy when they crave control, comfort, or emotional distance. Research on maladaptive daydreaming shows that it affects roughly 2.5% of people, and most use it as a coping mechanism for stress, isolation, or unresolved conflict. The issue is how subtly it disconnects you. You start choosing your inner world more often than your real one. Life feels muted. Responsibilities blur. Relationships become background noise. Worst case, you stop building the very experiences that could pull you out of the spiral. Friendships, achievements, moments that feel real. Author John Green once said, "You can't live inside your head forever." And it hits because the longer you stay in your imagination, the harder it becomes to return to yourself. That quote is the nudge. Your real life deserves attention too. To break the cycle gently, try grounding. Touch something cold. Describe 5 things you see, or step outside for light. Tiny anchors that pull you back into the present without force. If even one of these habits felt a little too familiar, you're not broken. You're human. These patterns show up quietly, usually when life gets heavy, and noticing them is the first real step toward change. What matters is that you're aware now. You're already ahead of who you were yesterday. If this helped you understand yourself better, stick around. There's a lot more coming. And remember, small shifts create massive change over time. You've got this.